Hey guys, so I did some research on the YXZ gear ratios and the gear reduction that's available for them to kind of do a comparison. And I want to share that with you. And also, I got a screen recorder working finally, so I'm not videoing my screen on my phone. Yay, technology. Thanks, Nick, for making fun of me. Anyways, so here we go. So 2018 YXZ. So if you're not like really into YXZs, this might be a little interesting for you. If you know everything about YXZ, this video is probably pretty boring, but these numbers might be useful, so I hope the spreadsheet's helpful. The original YXZ, there's only been two versions. There's the OG, which was up to 2018, and then there's the current one that's 2019 and after. The original one had different gear ratios. That was one of the major changes. So, gear ratios are torque multipliers. So when you see a number like 23.3 to 1, that means the torque that comes out of the crankshaft essentially gets multiplied that many times before it gets to the wheel. In other words, the crankshaft's going to make 23 rotations for every one rotation of the tire. So the original one had a final ratio in first gear of 23.3 to 1. That's a really, really high gear ratio for a side-by-side. Everyone complained about that. They were burning out clutches left and right. So Yamaha in 2019 said, hey, give you some lower gears. So they made a higher secondary reduction, and the secondary reduction includes the rear diff, by the way, a 7.33. They also gave you a lower first gear, which is a 2.4 versus a 2.2. So these numbers mean that the engine's going to turn more RPMs in those gears for a given wheel speed. This means that the top speed's going to be lower. But don't worry, they also put a bigger tire in 2019, so top speed ended up kind of similar. But the good thing they did was they gave us a really low first gear. So it made the machine a lot slower in first gear, but a lot torqueier, which gave you some more ability to not lug the engine at slow speeds to do some technical driving. So this next column H, compares the two gear ratios between the 2019 and the 2018. You can see that the primary reduction remained the same. This column just divides, right? So I'll click on this. It's just dividing those two to get a ratio. It's really kind of a percent, right? If you multiply this by 100, you'd get 1.0, or you'd get 107.3, so a 7.3% increase. So just dividing these two numbers. So the secondary reduction is a 7.3% reduction, we would say. And the first gear reduction is a 16.5% reduction, or 16.6. And then when you do the math, you actually multiply everything together to get the final reduction, right? Your primary times your secondary times your gear ratio that you're in. If you're in first gear, that's where you'd be in the mud. So this number right here is multiplying all those together and also just dividing the final reductions, because these already did that. These are already all multiplied together right there. So overall, the 2019 got a 25% reduction in first gear. That's a huge improvement. The other gears got, like I said earlier, a 7.3% reduction. So that's cool that they did that for 2019. That's definitely the reason I wouldn't get one older than 2019. Now the next thing, if you want even lower gears, is the GYTR ratio. It's a Yamaha kit that comes with different gears, two different gear sets, and a different clutch cover to give you excellent low speed maneuverability, rock climbing, whatever, according to the article. So here's the gear ratios for that. So you can see bigger numbers, which is good for lower gears. And then I went through and calculated the final drive ratio here. So it gets you to about 39 to 1, which is a huge improvement over both the 2018 and the 2019. However, you can look at the deltas here, right? And this gear reduction fits both of them, but it's going to make a bigger difference in the 2018 and older because it was geared higher to start out with. So you get a 30% reduction in every single gear, and you get an additional 27% reduction in first gear. And because the way ratios work, you multiply these two numbers together, and you get the overall change. So they call this a 70-30 reduction because you get a 66 reduction in first, which is about 70, so you round up there. I'm not sure why they did that. And then you get a 31% reduction in all the other gears. So they really should have called this a 66-71, or excuse me, a 66-31, but they call it a 70-30, sounds better, I guess, for marketing. But that is a serious gear reduction. It's a big improvement. However, in the 2019, it's not as big of a deal. In first gear, you get a 33% reduction, and in all the other gears, you get a 22%. So you could call this one a 33-22 if you wanted. So that's cool, and we can see that this number here. So this is an important number. It's like the most important here. It's so important, we should probably put it in bold. 38.8. That is the lowest crawl ratio you can get in a YXZ, effectively. We're going to talk more about that later. But that's pretty much the lowest. If you look at a Honda Talon stock, it's geared much lower than a YXZ. A Talon in high range, first gear, is geared lower than all the YXZ stock in low range, essentially, because the YXZ doesn't have high and low. So the Talon has some additional ratios here because it has a high-low range selector, whereas the YXZ just has 5 forward gears. The Talon has high and low and a 6th gear, so the Talon has 12 forward gears. This is one of the biggest reasons the Talon is much more versatile and overall a better side-by-side than a YXZ. The problem is we just had 2 of them on something different, so yeah, whatever. In low range, the Talon's crawl ratio is about 46-1. That's a lot lower than the lowest low range crawl ratio you can get in a YXZ, which is 38.8-1. That's this number right here. This number just divides those two. So basically the lowest geared YXZ you're going to get, the Talon is still geared 18% lower in low range. And that's why you can throw 33s on a Talon and go through a decent amount of mud stock, and you can't do even 30s on a YXZ without burning your clutch. Now, there are this thing called a crawl box, which is like a crazy expensive $5,000 mod. It's like a little intermediate transfer case that goes in between the YXZ engine and transmission. I don't like it because it's $5,000, and it's also a primary reduction. It's before the clutch. So it puts more torque through the clutch, but because the engine's at a higher RPM, it's not lugging the clutch, etc. So they do work. The crawl box basically gives you a low range with the YXZ, but if you need high and low range, you should have just bought a Talon in the first place. So all that to say, all these numbers right here really just say that the Talon is a lot more versatile and a lot better for mud and slow speed stuff than the YXZ is. I really want a YXZ because I want a clutch pedal, and I think they're cool, and I like the shocks, and I like getting sideways, and they're really good for the higher RPM sideways stuff. And even a stock 2019 YXZ with the airbox spacer, a tune, and exhaust, you can get another 20 horsepower out of it, and that makes it a good bit quicker than a Talon. The Talon's gonna be more versatile and it's gonna be more reliable, but the YXZs are pretty fun. So I'm trying to buy one. Even this video kind of turns you away from them, right? Because you can see they're not geared very low. The YXZ is really best meant for high-speed racing where you're not doing any low speed. Any low speed in the YXZ is going to drive you nuts, and you're probably going to get a sore leg from the clutch, and you're going to burn your clutch pedal, your clutch disc. But anyways, a little chart I threw together. Let me know if you like the new, less lazy screen recording method.